Hello and welcome to Martini's Eco and Country Bites. Today, this is what we're going to be chatting about. The plight of farmers and certainly rural communities in Western Australia, but the same story Australia-wide. Today, I'm going to be joined by a gentleman that I've had the pleasure of meeting in person, that had already had some great discussions with farmers and people in rural communities in the southwest and Western Australia that had great things to say about this gentleman, because he's one of us that's out there in the trenches fighting the good fight to make sure that rural and country areas are looked after, and certainly those communities that are all about agriculture. I'd like to welcome Bevan Eatts, who is the member of Legislative Assembly for the Warren Blackwood area. Welcome, Bevan, to Martini's Eco and Country Bites.
Yeah, hello, Martine, and hello, viewers and listeners.
Thank you for joining me today. I can see that you are definitely on the road, and that it's really important for people to understand that the work never ends for you guys. Really, let's be honest.
Yeah, look, the car's my new home/office. When Parliament's not on, you get out to your electorate and talk to your constituents as much as possible. So, this week I've been down Walpole, Denmark, back in Walpole, heading back to Manji later on this afternoon.
Maybe, Bevan, for those people that aren't aware of the Warren Blackwood area, you could sort of give a bit of an overview of the area that it covers. You said down to Denmark, and how far north does it come up?
So the Warren Blackwood electorate is basically 6 whole shires now after the last boundary redistribution. So we have the Shire of Denmark, we have the Shire of Manjimup, we have the Shire of Bridgetown Greenbushes, we have the Shire of Blight Brook, the Shire of Nannup, and the Shire of Augusta Margaret River, just to give everyone some perspective of the area we're going to cover, which is about 86,000 square kilometres.
And it's a huge diversity of agriculture and horticulture involved in that. Bevan, maybe you can share with us the really driving forces that got you involved in politics and running for the Nationals and being a representative of your community. What was it that really edged you on?
So I suppose to give everyone a bit of background about myself, 3rd generation farmer in Manjimup. We do beef cattle, we do sheep for wool and fat lamb production. We had a stone fruit orchard for around 22, 23 years, and we also grew vegetables, so like potatoes, cauliflowers, some gourmet pumpkins, spaghetti squash, sweet corn, beetroot, that sort of stuff. So being a farmer all my life, I was always told early, that, you don't whinge about things unless you're prepared to roll up your sleeves and fix them. So that got me involved with industry and community groups all my life, trying to stick up for your local community, make the regions better, improve. We shouldn't be second-class citizens because we live in regional WA. So that led me to join various committees and boards over the years from at the time it was WA Fruit Growers Associations where I first started, and then we morphed that into Fruit West. I was involved with local committees, Bushfire Brigade. We also got involved with, I was lucky enough to become chair of the Southern Frost Food Council. So we're the benefit of royalties for regions. We had basically some funding from Royalties for Regions to develop a brand, which was the Genuinely brand, and help promote all the produce that was grown from the region in the Manjimup Shire. Yeah. So over 56 different varieties of produce. So that probably introduced me to the National Party and the whole Royalties for Regions concept of putting that investment back into the regions for hospitals, schools, roads, and just, it was a really strong time. And I've seen firsthand what can happen if you've got a good, strong local member of parliament and what they can do in government for your town that you live in, for the whole regions. Got involved with the Manjimup Chamber. I was president of that. So yeah, it was just a natural transition, and when the opportunity come to put my hand up and run for the party. I thought long and hard about it because of, politics. You think, why do it to yourself? And
It's a dirty game.
yeah, and the reality is, I thought, well, I feel as though I could do a good job of representing people. People often ask, well, what can you promise if you get in? And I said, well, the only thing that I can promise is what I can control, and that's where if you have an issue, you'll be able to contact me, and you'll have a strong regional voice, and I'll do my very best to represent our electorate. And so far, that's what I'm trying to put all those systems in place, and we've been very strong in Parliament speaking up for our electorate. So yeah, and that's
bravo.
And I look, you sit in Parliament and you get there and you look at it and you think, well, what an honour and a privilege I have now to represent the people from Blackwood. And sometimes you sit back and you think, wow, are you worthy of being there? But I guess time and the outcomes that I can deliver will be the judge of that. Looking forward to the challenge ahead. It's an enormous task. Anyone that puts their hands up for politics, got their interest of their community in heart. So it's so far it's been an enjoyable ride.
I think the fact that you question that whether or not this, whether of that place shows humility that too many probably don't have, Bevan. That I think it's some kind of a passage of rite of passage for them because it's been in their family, or that's just what they were kind of groomed to be in that. And that's why the things that I've heard about you from people that I know in the community really struck them when we got to meet face to face. I think it was really important that people like yourself get to represent truly from the words of those constituents and the communities that you go and consult with. I just want to go back to really quickly when you said you've used the wording that you used to farm with fruit and veg. And obviously you used to be part of royalties for regions. So these are the two things that are a big one for me. So you've used that in the context that you're no longer doing fruit and vegetables?
So we went transition from vegetables into orcharding. And then we did that from 1997 through to I think it was around 2020. So we used to grow like 14 different varieties of plums to supply to the Metcash warehouse. And it was a really good market, but just the pressures on the producers, you had to, and this just wasn't Metcash, this was across the board of stone fruit growers of, oversupply. You end up with pressures to both supply more for less. And that just, my son come back on the farm in 2020 after being at Denmark Ag. Orcharding wasn't in his blood and wanted to go back into vegetables and he enjoyed that. So the profit margins weren't there. So you make a business decision, and we've transitioned away from stone fruit back into growing some potatoes for the local chip factory and also other vegetables for some markets that we have. So, and I'm very privileged that, your son shows an interest, has come back on the farm. And that's probably another driven me into politics is, we were just, got sick of seeing that erosion of personal and property rights. And I could see that, farming's a very tough game without the government putting barriers in front. I can see that, we're going to have a food security issue for our state if, the pressure keeps putting on the farmers like it is. There's a lot of young people that are choosing to go into, mining careers or other careers instead of coming back and working hard on the land and, almost becoming a slave to the land and struggling to make, good returns. I know the wheat market and the sheep market's a different type of farming, but in horticulture, generally, horticultural producers are doing extremely tough.
Yeah, I don't think, and maybe we could give a bit of an idea of people in cities and larger communities that don't have a lot to do with contact personally to farmers and people in horticulture that are growing fruit, veg, and obviously all of that encompasses that, even into going into like growing herbs and stuff like that. When we look at the profit margin that's being taken from this monopoly, and this is where I think the government has also failed, that they're allowed to have this price gouging, I guess you'd call it, but it's a total dictatorship of the market, and that farmers are being pushed further down into poverty lines where they're forced to sell. And this is where I've heard from many people, especially from the East Coast, that they said next year a third of farmers are walking away from their properties. That hurts me. Maybe you can give a bit of a breakdown about, well, let's just use your example for potatoes, what you're growing and supplying locally, and then what you'd be selling it for and what it's being sold at the markets for, or the shops, the monopoly, the two big guns.
I'll give you a good example in cauliflowers. So this last year we went back into growing cauliflowers. Now that's a very manually intensive crop. It's got to be hand harvested, so the labour component's quite high. Your minimum wage now for a casual is around $30.56 an hour. Plus you've got superannuation, 12%. Plus you've got workers' comp. There's this misconception by a lot of city people that farmers employ backpackers because they're cheap. Well, you've still got to pay a board rate. So the reason why we employ backpackers is it's very hard to find enough locals to fill the jobs. And if it wasn't for that influx of, whether it's the Pacific Islanders or whether it's the local, the travelling backpackers, we wouldn't have the workforce to be able to harvest our crops. So there's
half of France is still here, I think.
Yeah. So that's one of the issues. But this last season, cauliflowers, we were planting about 8,000 cauliflowers every fortnight, which sounds a lot, but it's not compared to what the industry used to be back in the late 90s. But we had two crops there where we never picked because of the price. At the time, at the local market, we could only get around 70 to 80 cents a cauliflower. So by the time we paid the labour, by the time we paid the crate hire, the transport, we were going to lose money. Yet at the time, you could go into any of the big supermarkets and cauliflowers were still worth $5 a head, was basically what they're selling them for. Yet as a producer, we were going to lose money by harvesting them. Now, we picked a little bit out of it for select markets that we had some guaranteed price, but it was just, we just had to leave them and feed them to the cows. And that's I've never had that happen before in my career as a farmer, where we haven't harvested a crop due to price, and it was quite heartbreaking, and it kind of
soul destroying,
just another kick in the guts. And all those, I was looking back through it was only 2015. Wages on the casual was around $20, $21 on the farm from memory. You had lower transport costs. Lower, it was everything. Yet now we're doing all that extra work and we're getting less money for our produce than what we were 10 years ago. Yet all your costs have probably gone up 30-40%. So, if you remove the passion of farming for it, any business knows that they can't survive on those sorts of figures. Then you've got the extra compliance you've got to do. It's just becoming really difficult, and it just feels like that we're making life more difficult for our farmers than it should be, and they certainly don't get the appreciation for the hard work that they do. You can't blame people for exiting and going out and doing something different. So that's kind of motivated me to go into politics. I'm not naive enough to think that one person can make all this difference, because the problems you have is democracy. When we vote, everyone gets a vote. But what it does do is it gives me the ability to have those conversations with the other decision makers and educate them. And that's what I've been really fortunate enough to find myself in a position to do.
I think that example really nails it, when we're paying exorbitant prices for something like a cauliflower, and then we're seeing that at the supermarkets, but then realizing that how little the cut is for the farmer. What people, you need to comprehend, that's why more and more our markets or our food veg is being dumped by international produce. And this is where it's really disturbing, is that farmers and Australians being taxed to the hilt. I mean, we could get onto net zero and do a whole segment just on net zero and how carbon emissions and carbon reduction and how the taxes are going to apply to farmers that will literally destroy so many industries. If you're talking about every time you take your tractor out to do work on the farm, that, you know, that's going to amount to X amount of tax. I mean, we're already paying taxes on everything that we do. Royalties for region, how did that have an impact for people that don't comprehend what royalties for regions was about and why, when it got pulled, how that impacted rural and regional communities and certainly farmers?
So, look, royalties for regions was really big. So it was Brendan Grill's idea back when they had the balance of power to form government in 2007-8, I think it was. They basically took 25% of the mine royalties and legislated that, you know, it's up to $1 billion, so you don't have to spend $1 billion, but the maximum of up to $1 billion must be spent in regional WA out of the mining royalties that are gathered to, you know, basically help schools, hospitals,
everything.
Just those community grass-driven projects that, you know, that have the community support. So it's like a grassroots, you know, it empowers the community to make those decisions. Well, we need this or this, and then that's the mechanism that then provides funding to basically those grassroots ideas. So when the Nationals and Liberals lost government in 2017 election, that's still in place. It's legislated. The Labor haven't basically removed that because they can't. But what they've done is just use that funding for different purposes. Like they fund, I think it was Water Corp out of there. There's the orange school buses. And that just frees up the funding that they would have used for that for something else, for, you know, our consolidated revenue. And then they've gone down the road of providing REDS grants, which is basically government picking winners in business. To me, the common sense approach is that we need to make sure that we have good hospitals, good schools, good roads, the whole community benefits, and then the government removes the barriers to do business, and then everyone has that equal opportunity to thrive on their own merits, not with government support, pushing out loans and not loans, sorry, grants and stuff like that. So there's been some interesting, you know, obviously grant packages around the native forest transition and how that's working. Yeah, it's just been the royalties for regions was just really made a difference, especially, you know, regional WA. It just changed it, put that investment back in the town, and we haven't seen that sort of level of investment over the last 8 years of Labor government, and we're looking at probably another 4 years of similar is the reality where we're at.
So with royalties to region, is that also governed by the way that the zones of the election boundaries sit, so that the region that you're in, you represent one of 6 large local shires of councils, whereas previously, now the city holds most of the votes. How does that impact royalties for regions and how it's spent then? Is that just regarding Labor makes most of that decision, or is it across the board that now it's vastly sort of dominated by city-driven thoughts, ideas, and what they think?
So to put it into like a bit more context, Cabinet make the decisions that where the money gets spent. So that's basically the 16 cabinet ministers and the premier. So what we've seen is basically an erosion of our regional voice. The changes to the upper house, where we used to have the six zones, is now we have all of that 36 or 37 now members representing all of the state. The problem we have in West Australia, there's roughly 3 million people in population now. I think there's around 2.3, 2.4 million of them living in Perth. So the votes aren't in the regions. And what we've seen now is that, you know, the amalgamation of seats, like last year, we've lost a regional seat in Moore and Northwest Central have merged into the Midwest seat now, so we've lost one regional seat there. So it's just being centralised to basically the population. So what determines an electoral seat is they try and keep it around 30,000 voters. And that's why every 4 years they do a boundary review in between the elections, just to, and there's always a little bit of tweaking, and that's done to try and keep the voter levels at around that 30,000 voters for each electorate. And that's why up in the city you have smaller seats, because therefore, they're just, there's 30,000 people that live in the city in a very close proximity. So
population density.
The decisions then can be focused to, well, we need to look at the people where the votes are. And that's the situation where we find ourselves now. And, you don't put the money into the regions because that's not where the votes are. And that's, been very disappointing. And that's where it's really important as a local member of parliament now that you've got that voice, and then you continue to advocate and shine a light on all the issues that we've got in these regions and what we need to do going forward to basically try and get some funding down. The Premier said before the election that they won't be upgrading the Margaret River Hospital because they've put so much money into Bunbury Hospital and people can travel to Bunbury. That's just, it's not right. It's not fair. And to expect people from Augusta, Margaret River to have to travel to Bunbury for a hospital is just,
it's unacceptable.
Yeah.
I'm just going to put up some headlines, and maybe that will sort of also bring up some discussions that I know that we have already talked about. So this is another one. So the comparison of what funding goes towards what industry to another, that's, this cherry picking. We've got the beef industry being supported, sheep's being kicked out, and then we're looking at the sustainability of farming in itself. This one is from the tractor aid cage that came through Victoria, and I think the signage on this is very much the sentiment from most farmers across Australia that this erosion of rights of farmers and food producers to actually look after their own affairs, essentially. It's got to the point where food security, as you've mentioned, is going to be a real issue. And this is what I'm really concerned about, is the lack of food security as well as energy security from having baseload power and industries that support it. So this is where across the board, all of these things here are very disturbing to me. If there's anything there you'd like to kick off and have more conversation about, Bevan, please pipe in, because it seems the disparity between the ideology of looking at beef is okay to be looking at, but sheep is not, because it goes against someone's moral ethics coding that hasn't done their research, as far as I'm concerned. And this is coming from someone who is a vegetarian, and I've done my research into this. I still have enough respect that people should be able to live their lives and make choices to live, put in their bodies what they want to put in, and have body autonomy. And certainly farmers should have the right to go about their business without this government destroying them. What, any of that you would like to sort of add to as well?
Well, I don't know whether we've got enough time, but we'll give it a shot. So there's a couple of things. So if we go back to beef, right? Now I'm a small cattle producer. We run 70 head, so in the scheme of things, it's next to nothing. But for us, it contributes a bit to our profitability of our business. So if we go back 2 years, that beef prices have kicked up a little bit in the last 6 months, but not last November, the November before. We turn out beef steers and heifers around that 300 to 330 kilo weight range. We were getting anywhere between $1,500 and $1,900 a head for them. Then 2 years ago, that dropped down to $800 a head to $500 a head for the heifers, and the steers both worth more. Now, the price, when I was talking to butcher shops at the time, their buy price dropped down $1 a kilo, and you did not see a reduction for the consumers. Now, they were saying there was a bit of oversupply. That was the issue that's caused the price drop. But if we had seen a reduction in the supermarket price, more people would have brought it. It would have assisted the producers in creating a bit of demand and a bit of pull through. So, who has the power that controls that price and keeps it up there is really interesting. But if you walk through a supermarket and you look at the price of whether it be apples, whether it be any sort of fruit and veg, if you look at it and something's for sale $5, halve that, and if the farmer's doing well, they might be getting 50% of that, and sometimes less. And that's there's no clear identifier for what producers are making. And I understand that you've got freight costs and the trucking company's got to make money, and the supermarket there's a middleman that sells the supermarket, they've got to make money. Everyone's got business costs and overheads, and then the supermarket. But the person that's taking the most risk in the farmer, doing the most work, is getting basically the least amount. And you can't keep taking those risks. One of the more concerning things I can see evolving is a lot of the supermarket chains now get involved with production royalties and owning the variety of, whether it be a variety of fruit tree, whether it be some sort of vegetable. So they invest into the plant propagation rights.
Mm-hmm.
But they can now own that and so no one else can grow it. So they can then control basically the whole supply chain. They can say, right, who's going to grow it, when you're going to grow it, how much you're going to grow it for, where it's going to get sold, and that's going to remove a lot of choice from horticultural producers going forward. Now, we've got to be mindful of that and make sure that we don't end up with a situation where everyone's just basically growing for the large supermarkets or at a dictate.
Corporatization of our food source, and once we became corporatized, where it's trademarked, that's when we've gone down a very slippery road. I think that once we get to that point where it's like, well, that's the apple that we're now claiming is ours, and so anyone can't propagate that or grow that, otherwise you're going to be sued. I want to just retract a little bit. You were talking about beef being sold at $1.50 a kilo, and this is where I think, well, if it's being sold or bought at $1.50 a kilo, surely that would be cheaper than this disgusting 3D printed beef, whatever they want to make it out to be, that real live beings that are healthy, that are well looked after, is going to be a much better consumption for our body than this 3D printed that definitely would cost more than $1.50 a kilo.
Yeah, it wasn't $1.50 a kilo. I was talking price per head. So say a 300, or we'll call it a 300 kilo beef animal to make the math. That's live weight. So when that price we were getting, the heifers come down as low as $500, and I heard some farmers were only getting $300 a head.
$300, I heard that too.
So when a beef's processed, generally you lose 50% of the weight through the guts and the skins. And then when they break it down into meat, you'll lose another 40%. So obviously you've got your processing costs on top of that. So that's kind of generally how it breaks from live weight price that a farmer gets when they sell through the sale yards down to basically how it comes down to selling into kilos per meat. So you have your 50% loss through your skin and your stomach, and then you lose another 40% in weights and trimmings, basically, to give you a rough idea how that breaks down. But the question was, before that low price, beef prices were as high as they'd ever been, yet you'd never seen a drop in the supermarket when the farmers basically got that reduction in price of up to over 50%. And as
it was never passed on to consumers.
Yeah, it wasn't passed on to consumers, and you just wonder why. And I know, the processors probably copped a hit when the price went up and they were running a loss, and they might think, well, now's the time to make it. But it's just, it's that whole system that it's always, that old saying where farmers are price takers. Just farmers, you grow. They're the only business where you buy everything at retail price and sell everything at wholesale price and pay the freight both ways. And that's the reality of the situation where we find ourselves in.
What solutions do you see that, I mean, for myself, I think the more that we come back to community markets where produce is sold directly back to the communities, and we have people going back into like community markets where it's all bought in and it's sold direct from farmer to the consumer, one that's bypassing all of that. That's something I think is a great solution in many communities. But how is it that we can get farmers feeling like they're more empowered again? I mean, apart from the fact that they're going to have to get out there and push back at the government because we can see that they're being railroaded in every way. There's green renewables pushing farmers to the point where the only way that they're going to make a profit or think they're going to have money in their pocket is to host to solar arrays and wind turbines, and then have huge grid line networks going through their farms that they can't stop people from entering their property anytime they want. That is a genuine concern that's happening in Victoria right now, and it's certainly something that's threatening Western Australia. What are the things that you think is essential for regional communities to realise that if we don't stand together and united on this, and even people in the city that are very concerned about these things, what is it that you see we need to do to win this?
Oh, look, it's supply and demand. You look now what's happening with the sheep prices. We've seen the ban on live sheep export. It's been a heap of producers make the decision I'm exiting the industry, didn't make their sheep, and now lamb prices are at record levels, over $300, and that's just because there's a lack of supply. The abattoirs are and processors are extremely worried about where they're going to get supply from, because the farmers have exited the industry. Our farmers, I think our issue is we produce too much food for our state's population. So, you've got your farmers markets and all that sort of stuff, but there's not the population for every farmer to say, well, I'm going to sell my produce locally. So when we used to grow stone fruit, yeah, righto, you can go there and maybe sell half a bin every week, but what am I going to do with the other 300? So, we export a lot. So our scale for our population, so is it going to get that bad that you're going to see producers exit because of the fact they can't make, you get to a level where there's not enough for us to feed our population, and then you'll see a correction of that supply and demand. You've seen it's happening a little bit in the apple industry now, where there's been a lot of producers exit, and now they're getting around that $5 a kilo mark that they need to make the apple industry sustainable. So things will balance itself out. Not saying that that's a good outcome, because there's going to be a lot of pain, a lot of hurt for some people involved along the way. But it's the where government needs to probably step in a little bit is just thinking about our food security. What we can do to assist in those export markets. Because I know Singapore is very strong, when COVID hit, where they had empty shelves, and their government was really smart about basically getting first rights of refusal on produce from Malaysia and other countries to ensure that doesn't happen again. And we need to start those conversations about how we can, basically tap into some of those export markets, because it's not that far away. It's, in WA we're privileged, same time zone. I think we've got to do as much as we can to explore those, and probably there's just that education of people in the city that all of a sudden they don't go and buy a piece of fruit because the price is too dear, whether it be an avocado, whatever. But the effort and the time and the cost that the producers have done to make that, they don't hesitate to go and pay $50 or $60 for a cigarette or a carton of beer. So I think,
and this is where net zero is only going to drive. I was just saying that a net zero and the costs and the taxes that will be applied across the board will put things out of consumers' affordability. I mean, people are already struggling to pay their power bills. I've never seen so many people openly complain about this is how much it costs per week to keep my power on. And I'm like, whoa. And I just think that if people can understand that there's no isolation in these issues, and if the government does not stop applying all of these taxes and starts giving some tax breaks and starts giving subsidies and funding like it has to foreign corporations that want to come in and take our money, that's great, and use up our resources. it'd be great if this government could actually put it back into the nation that works so hard to not just feed us, but feed a big portion of the world. And I think that this is where it's lost in translation. Exactly what you've articulated there, Bevan, is that we're not just feeding all of Western Australia, we're feeding so many other nations that cannot produce their own food, places like Singapore, other areas that require this as a baseline food supply or food chain. And by doing so, we're actually putting a whole economy at risk. It's not just one little part of it, it's a huge part of it. Food security is essential.
It's a real fear of producers I've spoken to out in the community around this emissions reporting and the costs that we basically forced onto producers, in the coming years, and that might be the tipping point between some people staying in business and some people exiting. So, it's a real worry, and we need to be really smart as a country and a government about how we, I suppose, navigate through these waters in the next few years, because we can either
it's right now
cripple our economy, or we can come out in a very strong position where we can assist a lot of businesses and see a lot of growth. But I've certainly got my concerns about where we're heading.
I'm very concerned. I think that farmers are predominantly very easygoing and tolerant personality types. You have to be that to survive it, I think that they're great planners for long-term strategies, which is why cutting them out of decision makings is the worst thing you can do, by taking away, taking the power back to the city where people don't have that same comprehension. But they've also sat by and let the government do this, and they've sat there dormant for too long. So all I can say is, I keep saying this to farmers and people in rural and regional communities, you need to speak up and speak out now, because once all the sheep are gone and once all of these industries are destroyed, to bring them back is near impossible. The one thing that we do see is different growing trends internationally is that people are going back to natural foods, natural sources of produce, and also things that they're wearing on their body, going back to linen, natural wools, natural fibers. And I have been saying to all of my farming family, for the love of God, do not get rid of your wool, sheep for wool. I said, because in the next 5 years, there's going to be such a shift away from fabrics that are not natural, that we're going back into totally natural. And these are going to be the backbone. It's the new backbone of all of these new industries that are growing, where we're going back to fibers that heal our bodies, everything that's good for our body, in looking at food as nutritional healing, instead of just looking at something that you put on the table 3 times a day to put in the body to fuel it. It's actually not. People are starting to get to that point now. And so it's like we have to stand together and keep a united voice in this, regardless if we have slightly different views. It's just that we must support our communities that are out there growing our food, and industries that are putting not only food on our table, but internationally. Without that, we are doomed.
And look, being a wool producer and a fat lamb producer, the couple of guys, especially in Manjimup up area, it's hard to get shearers because we have a lot of wet weather and not everyone runs sheep. But the shearers that we had now, they've not exited the industry. They're still in the industry, but they've moved over east where there's more sheep population. So that just makes that part of who now does the shearing, finding with a skill set to make that happen. And eventually, if it gets too hard or too expensive, you end up exiting because of those reasons. So
maybe the government can subsidise that. That'd be a nice subsidy, wouldn't it? It's like, to have teams brought in, like bring them in to support these industries. What happened to that? They don't want to work with us. They want to work against us.
Yeah, and I take my hat off to shearers. They're one of the hardest working industries that's going around. They earn every dollar they make, and without them, and you're going to see that effect with the closure of the live sheep export and that flow-on effect to the communities. What they put into the regional towns. It's just we're in for a bit of pain over the few years to come, unfortunately.
I think the pain's already started, because I do know people that are married to shearers, and they've said that already, that their work's drying up and they're having to look east or go elsewhere, even to New Zealand. And that's where it's devastating. It's like, so New Zealand will have the monopoly on it if we don't push back. And the fact that my family will come from sheep and wheat, and to think that our own legacy will be lost, and that all these generational farmers, their legacy will be lost, is incomprehensible. And it's not because it's not viable, it's just that the government allowed this to be destroyed by foreign policies and foreign agendas that we adopted, and it's not good for our nation and our communities.
Yeah, it's we've certainly got some issues that we've got to overcome, and it's we're in some challenges, and it's in a country that's got so much promise, and it's still the best country in the world, don't get me wrong. We just seem to be making it harder than what we should for people that live in it. So yeah, I'll be doing everything I can to try and draw attention and make the changes. That's the frustrating part about being in opposition. You can't make a lot of these decisions, but you certainly hold the government to account and highlight the issues that the people are actually facing in the electorate and in the community.
Well, I could say on my behalf, Bevan, I'm very grateful that someone like yourself is out there batting for us, because without strong people with a backbone that have such insight into regional and rural Australia, and as well as being a third generational farmer, you've lived it and breathed it. So when you go there, you go with such integrity. So thank you for that. And please come and join me anytime that you've got issues you'd like to discuss, because as far as I'm concerned, the more that everyone understands the issues and the plights of regional, rural communities and farmers, the better.
Yep. No, thank you, Martine, and thanks for the opportunity to have a chat.
Thanks, Bevan. Have a lovely afternoon.
You too. Cheers. See you, Martine.
Take care. Bye. Well, there we go, Bevan. What a lovely individual he is, and a true representative of the people. He's remembered that his job description is a public servant, and that's what he's out doing all day, every day, which is something that I was touched by all of the feedback that I had from so many people that were telling me what a true soul he is out there for all of our communities in regional, rural WA, that I know that he's helping. So thank you for that. I have got the last part of our segment today, which, as promised, today is the first time that I'm going to be doing a shout out to regional and rural community businesses. And the first one is from my lovely little town down in Southwest, Bridgetown.
Oh, 1 mile in fog patches and showers early Friday, but improving to greater than 6 miles on Friday morning.
Stars shining bright above you. Night breezes seem to whisper sycamore tree. Dream a little dream
Thank you for joining me today on Martini's Eco and Country Bites. I know we have a lot of work to do in this nation and pushing back and holding this government accountable for the insane acts it's doing against its own people. I hear every day that we're from the wrong nation to be looked after in this place, and being up in the city for some weeks now, I can see more and more that the changing demographics, and that everyday Australians and generational Australians that have lived here for hundreds of years, and those that were here before us, are not the ones being looked after. All I can say is that we need to work together, we need to push back and have a united voice. So this is me signing off for today on Edge Radio Australia. and letting everyone know that we've got this if we stay united. Have a great day.